Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. On the channel we post write-ups, unboxings, book hauls, book reviews and the occasional vlog. And today I have another book review for you, and it is Buried Deep and Other Stories by Naomi Novik. If you're not new here, you'll know I adore Naomi Novik's writing. I have read Spin in Silver and the Deadly Education series, and Uprooted is one of my must-reads this year, but I'm awaiting to read it because it's one of the ones I'm putting in the book club for an idea. So I have to wait until I come up in the wheel. One I have read is this collection of short stories. Now, quite often when you read a collection of short stories by one author, it can sometimes become samey. But I didn't find that with this one, which I was so happy about. I'm going to review each of the different stories and give them a star out of 5, and then just do an overall stars out of 5. I will briefly explain the stories. Some have quotes, some don't. I'm going to try to do this as spoiler-free as possible. As always, I'll read you guys the blurb first. Before we get into that, don't forget, if you like what you see, to subscribe to this channel. Your continued support means a lot, so thank you guys so much. A thrilling collection of 13 short stories that span the worlds of Naomi Novik, the Sunday Times best-selling author of the Scholarman series, including a sneak peek at the world of Abandon, the setting of her upcoming epic fantasy series. From the dragon-filled world of Temeraire to the gothic magical halls of the Scholarmans and the isolated villages from Uprooted and Spin in Silver, this stunning collection takes us from fairy tale to fantasy, myth to history, and mystery to science fiction. Here, among much more, we encounter a mushroom witch who learns that sometimes the worst thing in the Scholarmans can be your roommate, the start of the Dragon Corps in ancient Rome after Mark Antony hatches a dragon's egg, a young bride who finds herself gambling with death for the highest of stakes, Elizabeth Bennet captaining a long-winged dragon, and our first glimpse of the world of Abandon, a deserted continent populated only by silent and enigmatic architectural mysteries. Though the stories are vastly different, there is a unifying theme, wrestling with destiny and the lengths some will go to find their own and fulfill its promise. Another thing that it doesn't say in this blurb, but that is in this, is before each story there is a little foreword from Naomi Novik about the story, and I did find those fascinating, and they did make you think about the stories in a different way before you read them. So recommend reading the forewords before you read the actual short story. But let's go into short story 1, which is Araminta. This one, I found it was an interesting tale about a woman being sent to marry, but has a run-in with pirates on the way, and a leviathan and gods, and I love the light magic system used in it, and that it's not a damsel in distress, like she fully takes on her role. I didn't want the story to end, and it turns out from the foreword that Araminta was written as a response to the romance novels that Naomi Novik's mother would read growing up. So Naomi Novik read them herself, and this was her take on them, and I guess stopping the damsel in distress idea. I gave the first story 4.5 stars out of 5. The second story is After Hours, and in this one we return to the Scholarmans, which at this point is all but completely ridden of the Maleficara until the night time, and the school still manages to hold on to the desperation with the limited supplies, and also the fact that at night the Maleficara are still present, but we do get a visit from an old friend from the Scholarman series. Very fun. In the foreword, Naomi Novik just says how she always envisioned returning to the Scholarman, so this is sort of a turn and saying bye to it at the same time, and I give that 4.5 stars. We then have Vici, and this I do have to admit, I have not yet read the Tamara series. I have the first one, but I haven't actually read it yet, and I know it is a rather large series, so I need to be ready to start that. As someone who hasn't read it, this was my first glimpse into that world, and it is the traditional story of dragon versus knights, but turned rider instead. And in the foreword, Naomi Novik says about how her friend was greatly interested in Rome, and by a friend telling her about Rome, that's how Novik got the idea for Tamara. It's very sweet. I love the dragon, 4.5 stars, and I do have a quote from this from page 74. We sent a man to count its teeth, but he seems to be doing it from inside the creature's belly. We then have Buried Deep, which is the story that this collection is named after. It's a tale about the Minotaur in Crete and their sister, and it's very interesting and sad. It's the creation of the labyrinth. Naomi in the foreword says that she was thinking about paths in life when she wrote this, and I gave it 4 stars. It was very touching and sad, very, very sad. Did make me interested to read more about the Minotaur though. We then have Spin in Silver. We return to Spin in Silver, but with a different ending, and honestly it just made me want to reread Spin in Silver. In the foreword, it's mainly Novik questioning that she didn't know whether to include this or not because she knows it could be seen as a repeat, but she loved it and was glad she kept it in. I wonder if it is the short that she wrote getting the idea of Spin in Silver, but it really just made me want to reread Spin in Silver. So I gave that 5 stars, of course. We then have Common Places, which is a Sherlock Holmes short from the point of view of a mysterious woman. And if you have read Sherlock Holmes, there is a mysterious woman in Sherlock Holmes that it's rumored that Sherlock was in love with. But this was written because Novik wanted to see this woman from the Sherlock novels in more detail because you never fully get to understand her. So this was a homage, I suppose, to Sherlock Holmes stories, and I give that 4 stars. The next story was 7, and I loved this. It helps watching the Great Pottery Throwdown at the same time as reading this one, because it's a story of betrayal, but also love and, above all, sense. There's not much information in the foreword of why Naomi Novik wrote this one, but I still loved it and gave it 5 stars. We then have Blessings. This one was a fun take on traditional fairy tale godmothers, and I very much enjoyed the ending. Novik had in mind the mushroom-wearing fairy godmother who would not have been at this party. I gave it 4.25 stars. We then had Lord Dunsany's Teapot. This one was just so sad. It made me think of In Memoriam, which I'll pop a link above if you haven't seen my review on that. It's 2 unlikely friends in the trenches and a teapot that helps them get through it until it doesn't. Novik wrote this one as part of an anthology where each writer had to pick something from Dr. Lamshed's cabinet, and she took the kettle, and I gave it 4.25 stars. It is a very sad one. We're nearly through. We're nearly through all these shorts. We then have 7 Years from Home, and this one was science fiction. It had the most interesting world building out of all the stories in this. It felt like it's based on the colonization of America and the harm that was and still is done from that colonization of the First Nations, and it was a very hard-hitting story, though it is all told rather than shown, which did make it feel a little harder to read than the previous stories, but I did appreciate Naomi Novik trying a different style, and obviously it is a collection of short stories by the same author. It was really good that she mixed it up a bit. It's written as an experiment based on T.E. Lawrence's 7 Pillars of Wisdom. I gave that 3.75 stars. I think that is my least favourite. Nope, not yet. We then had Dragons and Decorum. I thoroughly enjoyed this. It's like a new version of Pride and Prejudice, but with the dragons, but also still keeping the major plot points of Pride and Prejudice, but it's done in a much more concise and summed up way. Elizabeth and Darcy's relationship, Novik says she doesn't have a favourite book, but she does own 7 copies of Pride and Prejudice, and I do have a quote from this. He had not blinked to be addressed from 5 seats away, nor when the officers had handed around the dishes among themselves, while his unhappy footman tried without success to dot in between and recapture them. This is Darcy inviting Elizabeth Bennet and all of her comrades to dinner, and the fact that they are not of high society, and so they're shouting across the table, they're just passing dishes between them. Loved it. 5 stars. And we then have the final story in this, which actually was my least favourite, and that is Castle Carlow, which is a kind of spooky fairy tale. Naomi Novik wrote it based on a distant mirror, and I gave it 3.5 stars out of 5. But in the very last story, The Long Way Round, I actually have quite a few quotes from this one. The strutting boy who'd come over this morning from the shake boat couldn't have been more than 13, but he'd been practicing hard to be as officious prick of 30. Beautiful. And the second quote, but for the moment, Ferrantis was just as sickly besotted as Aston was, despite also being terrified at the idea that anyone might notice. It was just as well that she'd hired a crew of 6 sensible men who all understood instantly without being told that they were meant not to know and that knowing would be unhealthy. This is the last story in Novik, and she's playing with the idea of a new novel. And though I wasn't hooked at first, the story and characters did grow on me, especially the part when one of the crew members eats a fruit without knowing if it's poisonous or not, and they're like, after the first bite, like, well, damage is done now anyway, just keeps eating it because it tastes good. That really made me like the characters. And this last story is Naomi Novik playing with the idea for their new novel. So I was happy to experience that, and I gave that 4 stars. Overall, for enjoyment, I gave this 7 out of 10. Writing style, 9. Plot, 7. World building, 10. Characterization, 8. Representation, 8. And originality, 10. Overall, it's a 4-star read for me. It is one that I would reread, which is very rare for a short story collection. A lot of short story collections I read, I take authors' names that I liked from them and then they go on. But I would reread this one, which is only the second short story collection I would reread. The first was the Tales of the Celestial Kingdom by Sulin Tan. So I now have 2 short story collections. All are short stories by the same author. So maybe that's the difference. I don't know. But it was 4 stars from me. I recommend reading it. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. If you like to see as soon as I upload, click that little bell down below. Your continued support means a lot, so thank you guys so much.